Hi, in this video I want to talk about the working of Excel VLOOKUP function, its uses, what are the limitations that a user should be aware of while using VLOOKUP function, and what alternatives can be deployed to overcome these limitations. I'll take different examples to cover upon these topics while explaining the working of VLOOKUP function and its limitations. Let's begin. VLOOKUP function is commonly used to conduct searches in Excel. In this particular example, we're trying to get corresponding categories of movies while we conduct searches of movie names in this movie database on the left. What I've done is I've applied the VLOOKUP function where I've provided inputs against four of its components. These components are first the lookup value, which is essentially the movie name in this example that we are trying to search in the movie database on the left. The second component is the table array, which in our case is the entire movie database. I've declared that as a range in Excel. The third component is the column index, which is the position of the output that we want. In this example, the movie category is the output, and we need to tell the function the relative position of category in this database. Thus, we pass a value of 3. The fourth component of the VLOOKUP function is declaration of whether the user wants an exact or an approximate match. An exact match is when we want the output against the exact name of this movie name in the movie database. In all our examples in this video, I have used the exact match criteria across all uses of VLOOKUP function. Once I apply this VLOOKUP function, I get the desired output. As you can see, we can successfully get the categories of all different movies. But let's say one of the movies was not present in the movie database and I just put a random movie name. The VLOOKUP function returns #NA as the output, which is essentially an indication that the lookup value that we are trying to search does not lie in the movies database. Let's now apply the VLOOKUP function in the below two columns. I'll just copy paste the formula from the top. You can see that the formula gives the correct output for the category column but not for the year of release. The reason is that while formula is applied for the year of release, the lookup value now becomes the category which needs to be corrected. So let's make that correction. What we'll do is we'll column freeze the lookup value and then copy paste this formula across year of release. Again, the value got populated, but it is giving the same output as that of category. What we need to do is provide the correct column index for corresponding to the year of release. As you can see in the header of this table, the order of year of release column is 8. Thus, we need to pass a column index value of 8. So this gives us the correct output. Let's put this formula across all the cells below and it gives us all the values of categories and the year of release. Now at this point, we might assess whether we really want to pass the column index value in the formula through a manual process. This is where we come to our next topic, which is how to apply VLOOKUP function when it comes to multiple columns, especially when the relative position of some of the columns are unknown. In this example, we have 3 columns on which we want to apply the VLOOKUP function. You can see that the column index is still passed as a hard-coded value in the formula. The only variation that I've tried in this example is mention the column index somewhere over the table. So for category, I've mentioned column index 3 above. Similar for PGP rating, 6 above, and for viewer rating, 4 above. And these positions is something that I've taken from this movie database out here. Now I am referencing these column positions in the formula, and what I'll do is simply copy paste this formula across all the cells. So compared to the previous example where we were hard coding the column index within the formula, we are now first mentioning that value somewhere over the table, and in the VLOOKUP formula we are referencing those cell positions. So it has definitely made our job easier because unlike earlier, we need not edit the formula at 3 places. But having said that, the manual process of first finding the position of these columns in the table array is still time consuming process. Imagine if there were 15 columns for which we first need to find the column index. That will be a time consuming task. Our next example is something that I want to bring up to explain what I just said. In our next example, there are 6 columns and we need to first locate the relative position of these six columns in the movies database. Definitely, it is a time consuming task as the order of the columns is jumbled up. Now, instead of manually finding the relative position of columns, what I can do is I can explore to somehow find the relative position through a formula. And one such function which will help me do that is the match function in Excel. So match function takes in three components to work. First, its first component is it searches for a particular value. In this example, it is searching for year of release. Then it searches it in a particular array. This array is the horizontal array, which is the header of this table. And it again asks whether the user wants to do an exact search or an approximate search. Since I wanted to do an exact search, I mentioned 0 as the third argument. So out here, match function is first helping me identify the position of these columns in the table array. And similar to the earlier example, I'll just reference the position of these cells, these numbers, in my VLOOKUP formula. And all I need to do is copy paste this formula across all cells and I will get the desired result. Now, one advantage of using match function to first locate the position of these columns is that even if any change is made in the position of one of the columns, let me just quickly move one of the columns to a different position. That has no effect on the output where the match function is used. For example, I moved the category column to the sixth position now. Let me quickly correct the numbers on the top so it does not create confusion. So now category column has a position of 6 and this is what automatically reflects through the match function out here. If you see the formula on the top, now an incorrect value starts appearing in the category column because it was still referencing third column which was a hard-coded value. Another way to make this concept very clear is to look at this example. Here we're trying to search information of a particular movie on a online movie database. By inputting the movie name and by selecting what information we want to see for that movie, we can see the information out here. For example, if I change the information aspect from category to, let's say, PGP rating, it quickly refreshes and provides me the PGP rating for that movie. Similarly, I can change number of reviews to, let's say, earnings, and it will give me the desired output. And you can very well guess that in the formula of this cell, I have used the match function. So by using the match function, any change in the column names is automatically taken care of. Another good use of using a combination of VLOOKUP and match function to identify the relative position of columns is this. Let's say you want to subset a very large data set which has, let's say, 500 plus variables, and you want to create a smaller data set out of it and which has only, let's say, 5 to 6 columns. What you can do is first create a list of all the customer IDs listed out here and just mention the names of all the columns that you are interested in. I've just written 5 such column names with variable as the prefix. All I need to do is first apply a match function to find where each of these 5 variables lie in the larger database, and then embed that match function output within the VLOOKUP function like we did earlier. And it will automatically populate the corresponding values of these 5 columns for all the customer IDs. At a later point, let's say you realize that it was not variable 101 which you wanted, rather it was variable underscore 100. All you need to do is make that change in the header name and the corresponding values will automatically refresh. While VLOOKUP function is quite commonly used function in Excel and a quite powerful tool to conduct searches and return values, one should also be aware of what limitations this function has so as to be sure whether it produces the right results or not. One such limitation of the VLOOKUP function is when the columns that you want output of lie on the left side of the lookup value. Let me explain that with an example. In this particular table, I'm trying to search the corresponding PGP rating of movies by looking movie names in this database on the left. You can see that the PGP rating column lies on the left side of the column movie name. Now, one of the essential conditions for a VLOOKUP function to work is that the lookup value should be the first column in the table array that we pass. By design, the column PGP rating will be left out of this table in the VLOOKUP function. Thus, VLOOKUP function will not be able to help me look up movie name and return PGP rating as an output in this case. Another limitation of the VLOOKUP function is that it doesn't produces the desired results when they are duplicate entries of the VLOOKUP value. In this movie database, I have highlighted the movie names which occur twice. For example, the movie name which occurs in the first two rows, that's the same name, but you can see that the year of release is different. So these are essentially two different movies with the same movie name. Similar is an example which is also highlighted. Now these are two movies with same name but different year of release. Let's say if a user wants to conduct a search using these movie names and want to get the corresponding viewer rating and number of reviews, you can see that the VLOOKUP function produces repeating values for both these columns. The reason is that the VLOOKUP is performed solely based on the movie name and it returns the value corresponding to the first occurrence of this record in the movie database. Essentially, these values belong to the movie with the year of release 1997. Similarly, for these two records, the values that the VLOOKUP function returns correspond to the movie with the year of release 1991. For someone to populate the correct values for these second rows for these two movies, one also needs to include the year of release as one of the search criteria. So essentially, one needs to use both the movie name as well as year of release to make the exact search and return the correct corresponding values of viewer rating and number of reviews. This is where the third limitation of VLOOKUP function becomes clear, which is it cannot be applied to search more than one criteria. Having talked about the limitations of using VLOOKUP function, let's now talk about the different alternatives that we can use to overcome these limitations. We can use the match and index functions to overcome these limitations of the VLOOKUP function. The way match and index function works is like this. The match function takes as an input a value and returns the position of that value in the defined array. The index function does an exact opposite job of what match function does. It takes position of an element as an input and returns the value of that element occurring in the array. In the below example, I have tried to put a demonstration of how one can get PGP rating corresponding to a movie name, especially when the PGP rating column is lying on the left side of the movie name column. And I have used the match and index function combination to do that. Now what match function does is it first searches for this movie name in the array C7, which is essentially the movie name, and it provides the position of occurrence of this movie name, which is row 3, and thus gives 3 as an output. The index function uses this 3 value as an input and it returns the value of PGP rating for row 3 in column C3. Essentially, it is taking position as an input and it is returning value as an output, which is the value of PGP rating corresponding to this particular movie name. Also understanding this concept using another example where we are trying to search this movie name and trying to get the corresponding PGP rating. Again, we are trying to make use of the match function, which first tries to locate where this movie name occurs in the column C7, the movie name. As you can see, it occurs in row 9, so the match function returns an output of 9. The index function makes use of this value 9 and it searches which value comes in row 9 for column C3, which is the PGP rating, and it returns value R as an output. Now, as you can see, a combination of match and index function is used to get the desired output. While one can keep both these functions separately, but a better practice would be to include the match function within the index function instead of this cell P3, which is what I've done out here in this cell, where both the functions are written in the same formula and it is producing the same output out here. Now, in our earlier example where we saw the first limitation of VLOOKUP function, I've used a combination of match and index function to get the PGP rating corresponding to each of the movie names. I was searching the PGP rating using the VLOOKUP function, which did not give the desired result. But when I use the match function on these movie names, first what I get is the position of occurrence of each of these movie names in the movie database. Below is a glimpse of the movie database that I showed you earlier on top left. You can see the first name appears in row 3. Similarly, the last movie name out here appears in row 11 in the below snippet of data. The index function uses these row positions to return the PGP rating for these row numbers. For example, the first movie name, the PGP rating for row 3 is returned, which is PG13 out here. Similarly, the last movie which occurs and which has a row 11 returns a PGP rating of R out here. Now let's understand how we can make use of the match and index function in this kind of a scenario where we had duplicate entries of the lookup value. Similar to the earlier example, now we are trying to search a combination of movie name and year of release in this table and trying to get the corresponding PGP rating where both these criteria match. Again, I'm making use of the match function first to retrieve the row in which both these criteria match. You can see the match function returns an output of 7. Let me give you a glimpse of what goes in the match function. Don't get overwhelmed by the complexity of this formula. I will explain this in a little bit. For now, we can just focus on what is the output that the match function gives, which is row 7. And row 7 is where both the movie name and the year of release match, and which is exactly what match function gives. Now, all that is left is for the index function to retrieve the PGP rating at row 7. And this is what it does. Now let's understand how the match function is working in this kind of a scenario where two conditions are looked up. Through the means of this visual below, I've tried to explain what's happening inside this match formula. You can see that it's an array function, and in the middle portion of the match function, you can see that there are two arrays which are first being compared to certain values, and the product of those comparisons are then multiplied. This is what I've tried to show in the below visuals. So let's take the first comparison where the movie names are compared to this value that we have declared in the cell N36. So all the movie names lying in this column C7 are first compared with this movie name mentioned in cell N36. And wherever there is a match, it returns a value of true. You can see that for row 6 and row 7, since the movie name match is there, it returns a true flag. A similar comparison is done for the year of release values in column C8 against 2015, which is the value in N41. And you can see only in row 7 where 2015 value is present, it returns a true flag. Now all that is left is to multiply these two flags to get a 1 or 0 binary output. Now let's go back to the match function and get the calculated output of this multiplication. I'm pressing F9 to create the output of this product. As you can see, it gives a similar array which we are seeing down below in the column A cross B. And you can see that the value 1 appears at the 7th position. Now all we need to do is search the position of occurrence of value 1 in this array. This is exactly what match function does, as I explained earlier, and we are doing an exact match. That is where the third component has a value of 0. So match function now looks value of 1 in this array and returns 7 as an output. So through these examples, we looked at how a combination of match and index function can be used to overcome the limitation of VLOOKUP function. I hope this video was useful in understanding the essential working of VLOOKUP function, its various uses, the limitations, and how to overcome these limitations. Thanks.